WCNC Charlotte, this is Flashpoint.
Thanks for joining us here on Flashpoint. I'm Ben Thompson. The midterm election's now just a few days away, and folks, a lot is on the line. The biggest race, the U.S. Senate race between Ted Budd and Cheri Beasley. Also on the ballot, congressional races across the Carolinas, including that new seat that North Carolina gained during the U.S. Census. It covers southern Mecklenburg County and Gaston County. You also have state legislative races, who we send to Raleigh. Often overlooked, but state lawmakers impact your child's education, how you're able to vote, and access to abortion. Not to mention county commissioners also on the ballot. Lots of judge races and bonds. Joining us now, some of the smartest folks I know when it comes to this midterm election. Susan Roberts, professor at Davidson, and Scott Huffmon, professor of Winthrop. Thank you both for coming on. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
My pleasure.
Susan, I'll begin with you, and I'm going to ask the same question, Scott, of you. Size up this Senate race here in North Carolina, Beasley versus Budd.
Well, one of the things that strikes me is kind of with informal, with friends, they're all astounded at why this race isn't the most competitive, the one that's going to tilt the balance for the U.S. Senate. And it's just not where the money is. And I think North Carolina, the parties, the Democratic Party said, we've invested a lot the last three elections and we've gotten nothing out of it. And so I think that's kind of the general ambiance. And I've seen very different figures. I don't know what I thought. Cheri Beasley was behind by one, and then I thought I heard that it was like a 7-point lead for Budd, and it's gone back and forth. And so I don't know who to believe in that one. All I can say is I think it's going to be very tight.
Scott, how do you size this one up?
Susan's right. It is tight, but Republicans have a bit of an advantage in likely voter turnout. If you look at the polls among registered voters, it's a dead heat, but Republicans are just a hair more likely to turn out. So when you look at the models that take that into account, then Budd has an edge by a few points. In many of the polls that are comparing simply registered voters to likely voters, his edge is just outside the margin of error. So that means Beasley has to play catch up, even though she's done an amazing amount of fundraising.
And may I add one thing to that, Ben? I'm amazed that Ted Budd has some ads that are so negative about child predators that I looked to see if they were from super PACs, and no, indeed, they were from Ted Budd himself, which is kind of extraordinary.
And the ads from the outside races, from outside money is starting to flood the state as well. And that's a bit of a surprise because, as Susan pointed out, we expected more money from the national level to flow in on Cheri Beasley's side, and she's had to front the money of her own. It really looked like North Carolina might be in play for a pickup for the Democrats, but they, as Susan pointed out, they haven't looked at it that way, and they have reserved their money so far.
Why do we think that is? They were burned by Cal Cunningham and some of the other Democrats who've run for U.S. Senate in the last few cycles?
I think part of it is they were thinking that Cheri Beasley was going to get a lot of outside money from Emily's List, from a group, Higher Heights, that funds Democratic women running for higher office. And it just hadn't materialized. Plus, she said she wasn't going to take corporate PAC money. And so I think it just slipped when other races became much more high visibility. Part of it is curious to me why the party didn't invest more.
Scott, what does this mean for the overall U.S. Senate? The balance right now, with Kamala Harris being the tiebreaker, leans Democrat by one. Where does it stand come Wednesday?
Well, a lot is actually going to hinge on Pennsylvania. If the Democrats can pick up Pennsylvania, then all of a sudden the Republicans' path to control of the Senate gets more narrow. But if the Republicans, if Dr. Oz picks up Pennsylvania, then all of a sudden the Republicans have several paths that they're going to be able to take to control the Senate. Several of the races, whether you're looking at Nevada or Wisconsin, every poll has them as a toss-up. And there are several paths to Republicans taking control and a handful of paths for Democrats retaining control. So it's going to hinge on races such as Pennsylvania. North Carolina, if we assume that it stays in Republican hands, then that becomes even more important to see what the Democrats can do in Nevada, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania.
Susan, where do you think we stand Wednesday?
Well, I'm really right now. I'm not looking at the polls about who's ahead or who's behind. I'm looking at the turnout numbers, and I think Wednesday we're going to see a large turnout. I think we're going to see, the college student turnout. Wait till the last minute, and that might be the group that is going to vote more on access to abortion, because that really hasn't materialized. And I think Wednesday morning we're not going to know where the Senate is, because I think Pennsylvania doesn't start counting absentee ballots until the day of the election. And, they were the ones, I think the last ones that declared, Biden the winner. So I think Wednesday, there might be many people that wake up and think the Republicans who were showing up on Election Day, swept. That won't be the case. But I think there'll be some good indications about control of the House and control of the Senate. That's what I would say you need to look for.
Let's talk about some of those House races. There's the Congressional District 14 here. It's the new one that was created by the new census numbers, gave us an extra seat here. Jeff Jackson, Pat Harrigan, in what is a seat in a district that probably will not exist in a year ago because of redistricting, and we never seem to settle on district lines here in North Carolina. What are the challenges that those two candidates have faced? Susan, I'll start with you.
Well, I think one of the challenges, at least initially, which I think has faded, and that is that Bo Hines was kind of district shopping and trying to say, where will I play? And that really is, I don't think, everybody wants an R or a D by their name. I think that one is tightening. Do I think that it's going to go to Harrigan? I don't think so, but I think it's gone from, as Cook had it, a +5 Democrat to maybe a +3 Democrat. And there's been some very aggressive ads by Harrigan at the last minute. And at the last minute means for the people who haven't made up their mind, for the people that aren't strong partisans. So I think you're going to see the race tighten. I think Jackson is going to win.
Susan, you mentioned Bo Hines. He ended up running in the 13th district against Wiley Nickel, which is really the really the only sort of battleground district, it seems like, in North Carolina that's really, really neck and neck. How do you see that race shaping up over near Raleigh?
Yeah, sorry, I made a mistake on that. I think that race is still going to be competitive, but I think people are looking and saying, where do I vote? How do I vote? Do I have ID? I think North Carolina is a very confusing state.
Coming up, our conversation with Susan Roberts and Scott Huffmon continues. Next, we'll discuss how the issues, everything from the economy and inflation to abortion, are playing into this year's election.